Howdy, folks. I hope y'all are having a pleasant Monday evening. This is the Mad Painter, and this is Open Canvas, and we're at Revolution.Radio. Remember, we are totally listener supported, so if you got a buck or two, we'd sure appreciate it. I got a interesting show for you tonight. I found extremely interesting. There's a book out that's called that follows along the lines of Velikovsky's Worlds and Collisions, and the title of it is Cosmos and Collisions. And I run across it, and I got thinking about it, and some of the stuff that it talks about is just pretty awesome. So I brought one of the authors on. His name is Theodore A. Holton. I'm not sure if he wants to be called Tim or Theodore.
Ted.
Or Ted. Okay, there you go. He is a software developer for 40 years, and he's helped the U.S. military in projects including BART, which is Base Recovery and Attack. I find the information extremely interesting because personally, I don't think we're from here, and I believe the information that he comes off with is extremely intelligently contrived, and it just makes a lot of sense. So I thought I'd get him on here and we'd have a talk with him. How are you doing this evening, Ted?
I'm doing pretty well, and I'm happy to be on your show. It sounds like a bigger show than I've been on previously.
Well, you were on the one in Alaska. I think that's probably bigger than this one.
I've been on Tommy Anderson's show. Lately, I've had a number of interviews with the Doc Green show, which is out of Houston, which is normally a conservative political talk show. When I'm on the show, it's about renegade science topics, which include the Ganymede Hypothesis, as well as other types of things that you would call renegade science.
Well, now, see, I don't call it renegade science because science is supposed to be open to all possibilities, regardless of how far-fetched they sound.
That's correct. Now, for somebody to take the positions that I've taken on a number of these issues, you know, you have to be outside of academia. Okay, I never had the PhD sickness. I saw that ruining lives when I was 22 or 23 years old. People who were 35 years old had never done anything but go to school. You know, and at that point I made the decision to get out, right? So that, you know, I'm like, in other words, my livelihood never had anything to do with these types of basic sciences.
Yeah, you don't have to toe the company line in order to get paid for what you're...
No, and that's a real problem. This is what I call the yuppification or the yuppifaction of science, right? If you go back to the 1820s or something like that, the typical scientist was also a member of the House of Lords or had a sponsor who was, right? So that you could, you know, the guy could afford to take it, you know, to come up with some kind of a radical new position on something. He might get laughed at, but they couldn't take his livelihood away from him. You understand what I'm saying? It's what we have now in this publish and perish world. I mean, it's like a new idea most often is shot down before it ever manages to take off.
Well, they tried that with Velikovsky.
Yeah.
I mean, they ostracized the guy.
There are other stories like that. Velikovsky's story was, you know, I wouldn't even know where to start with that. It's like he's been proven right.
Oh, so many times.
Right. Now, he wrote a book about catastrophism within the age of man, particularly as regards the planet Venus. And he had claimed early on, before we had any idea what was actually going on Venus, that Venus would be incandescently hot. Just, in other words, ancient literature describes Venus as a new planet, as something used to go across the sky like a torch, right? And, you know, up until the 1950s, they were teaching that Venus would be, you know, 10 or 15 degrees warmer than the Earth at a given latitude simply due to its position in the system, right? And they eventually got, you know, Velikovsky, by the way, I mean, it had a book which had been a runaway international bestseller for 5 or 6 weeks and was then banned, right? And this is a book that didn't have any naked people in it or anything like that, just a pure science book. How does the science book get banned in 1950? You know, the answer was it was mainly the astronomy departments just completely freaked over it, and they told Macmillan that they would either drop the book or they wouldn't be able to sell textbooks in North America, right? So they handed Worlds in Collision off to another publisher, which didn't have a textbook division. And you know, you can read the story, right? I mean, it's still an interesting book. That's the best description that there is of the Jewish Exodus, you know, and what you call the plagues of Egypt.
Right.
There had been,
what got you started looking into this alternative view on how the cosmos come together, our solar system come together?
It was those 10 or originally it was those 10 or 12 issues of the Ponce Journal, which David Talbot and those guys put together, right? This was like 73, 74, somewhere around there. And then they had a big conference up at McMaster University, which I actually drove up to and attended. It was sort of that was like 74. And that was the first time, and I got more out of just talking to some of the people that I managed to speak to at that conference than I had out of anything that I'd read. I mean, there were people that were really telling me about the Saturn thesis. I mean, you didn't have anything published at the time. You're familiar with the Saturn theory or with different versions of it?
Oh, different versions of it. I've got my own little take on it too.
Okay, you've got 5 or 6 versions of a Saturn theory floating around, right? The only thing I'm sure of is that, you know, 40 years from now, some version of a Saturn theory will be accepted. Now, if there's justice in the universe, it'll be mine and Troy McLaughlin's version of it,
right,
which is different in a couple of ways from other versions of a Saturn theory. But, you know, what I tell people is that if you were to go to some kind of a place where primitive people congregate today, you know, and just tell them, guys, you know, I need an astral religion. I need some kind of a new religion. You know, going into business here, I need some kind of a new religion, you know, which involves worshiping things you see in the sky, right? $100 a piece, just, you know, need you to come up with something. I'd be back in about 3 hours, right? You know, whatever they would come up with would involve worshiping the sun and the moon, wouldn't it?
More than likely. I mean, they're the biggest things in the sky. I mean,
yeah, by far, right? I mean, you know, the average person can find Venus easily enough. Anything beyond that, the average person in the United States probably couldn't find.
Well, no, yeah, most people have no clue that, you know, Jupiter, you know, is visible in the sky and Saturn's visible if you know which star it is.
Saturn barely, right? Jupiter, you know, it's like the average person, if he put his mind to it, could find if he knew what he was looking for.
Right.
Right, but the 2 chieftain gods of every one of those old religions were not the sun and the moon. They were the 2 dwarf stars, Jupiter and Saturn. Right, and that's a sort of a conundrum, right? You know, in other words, if you don't know anything else about what's going on. See, we still have vestiges of this thing all around us. I mean, we still call our Sabbath Saturn's Day, right? We still, you know, like Saturnalia, right? The really big religious festival in ancient Rome. It's like we're surrounded by vestiges of this thing. The Muslim symbol that you see, you know, which most people take to be a star inside a crescent moon. What's wrong with that picture?
Well, it would line up if the, you know, it was eclipsed. Let me
tell you what's wrong. It's like, you know, if we're seeing a star inside a crescent moon, then the star either has to be in front of the moon or behind it, right? If the star
it's got to be some form of ecliptic.
Yeah. If a star is behind the moon, then the moon will block out the star, you know, regardless of whatever kind of phase the moon is in. And if you ever had a star coming between the moon and us, it would fry us to cinders. We wouldn't be here talking about it. Okay, so that the idea of claiming that Muslim symbol is a moon star symbol makes no sense logically.
Now you come to these conclusions by using literature and stories and myths and chronological dating, you know, of other myths and legends from different parts of the world, right?
There's more to it than that. I mean, what I normally tell people
say this is part of some of your conclusions.
That's part of it. That's correct.
Similarities in all these cultures that point to the same exact symbolism.
Right. Do you have this thing which I linked here, which is on bearfabrique.org?
Yeah, I've got it.
The little thing which I call a set of images and talking points. Can your audience see that?
I put it in the chat room for them.
Okay.
Now you have to go to Bear Fabric.
Okay, this is like a It's my hobby shop.
Give them a web address so they can.
Okay, excuse me. This is my hobby shop website, which is called bearfabrique.org. Now, this is like a bear in the woods, B-E-A-R, and then the ordinary European word for a factory with French spelling, F as in Frank, bearfabrique.org. Fabrique, like you're going to fabricate something, right? A Russian or German would spell that F-A-B-R-I-K, French F-A-B-R-I-Q-U-E. This is bearfabrique.org, and about the second item from the bottom says RevolutionRadio.a.pdf.
Right.
Okay, and you can grab that and put that up on your screen, and you'll see these pictures. Yeah. Now, I had a number of pictures which
I have it up.
Okay, I wanted to talk about just electricity and the fact that our universe is governed by electromagnetic and electrostatic forces and not by gravity. Okay, right. I mean, our schools still teach a gravity only or gravity mainly cosmology.
Well, I got a problem with gravity because, I mean, here we are. It's supposed to be holding galaxies together, yet we can pick up a wrench off the ground.
Yeah, that's correct. It's like, gravity is by 40 orders of magnitude the weakest force in nature. Asking gravity to form a solar system up out of dust or to hold a spiral galaxy together is like asking the littlest kid in the school to do the powerlifting event. It's just ridiculous.
Right. Well, see, that was my point when I said, because it's supposed to be the strongest force, holds right. Galaxies and, planets together, yet we can stand up against it.
Okay, let me run a few of these pictures by you. The first picture is called our local supercluster. Okay, it's called Laniakea. Okay, it looks like a lightning strike or an electrical discharge of some sort. Every point of light in that image is an entire galaxy. Now, this is an astonishing achievement for the people that have put this together, right? It involves, major use of computers as well as the new telescopes, which are in space and which don't get, messed up by the Earth's atmosphere. Like I say, you can see that one little dot over there in the far corner, which is the Milky Way galaxy. Like I say, every point of light in this thing is an entire galaxy, and this thing is created. It's obvious enough. This is an electrical discharge, the whole thing. And it's created by electrostatics.
Yeah, it looks like a spark going off.
Yeah, that's because that's what it is. Now, the next little picture that I have, if you scroll down just a little bit, it says Birkeland currents, named after a gentleman named Birkeland. And these are the kinds of electrical currents which you have arcing through space. Now, space is not a vacuum. It's a plasma, okay? And plasma is this fourth state of matter, right? It's an electrically dissociated state of matter, and it spreads out through the universe everywhere, pretty much. Because of this, you get charge separation within this plasma, and because of that, you get what they call Birkeland currents arcing through space from regions of one kind of charge to regions of another, right? And these currents are actually twisted pairs of currents. They look like DNA, RNA spirals. And you can see the...
Is this what a lot of people would call nebulas?
The Birkeland current, which runs through the center of our own galaxy, is called the... I like to think of it as a twisted pair. It's called the double helix nebula. Okay. The picture that you see in the middle here is the double helix nebula that runs through our own galaxy. Now, it turns out that
which is named because it looks like our DNA.
Yeah, that's correct. It's basically a Birkeland current. It's the thing that powers a spiral galaxy. A spiral galaxy is basically a homopolar motor. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit further. This is a little bit better image of the double helix nebula, which again is just a Birkeland current. Right. You can see the way that it spirals.
This is what is along our galactic plane of the Milky Way galaxy, right?
No, it goes straight through the plane.
It goes of the through the middle of it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, like as if you had like some kind of a spinner on a string or something. You've seen that where you have like.
Right. I want people who ain't looking at the pictures be able to understand what you're saying.
So right.
This actually cuts through it like a top.
Right. Okay. Let me scroll down. The next picture I have shows the new image of the galactic center of our own galaxy. the Milky Way, taken by this fabulous new radio observatory in South Africa, the Meerkat. And the claim that you'll pick up science journal articles which show this, and what they will say is, this is the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. That's what they say. Now, what I told Doc Green the other day was that this is exactly like having somebody show you a picture of a pig and tell you that you're looking at a duck, right? I said it's exactly like the story of the wildebeest who walks into the bar with a duck under her arm. You know, the bartender said, "That's a mighty fine-looking pig you got there." He said, "That's not a pig, you dummy, that's a duck." He said, "I was talking to the duck," right? So, at any rate.
Well, so you don't believe there's a black hole at the center of our universe?
No, there's no black hole in that. If there was in fact, there's no such thing as a black hole. Okay?
Okay.
This little club, which is like authors of dead science theories from past centuries, is not just Charles Darwin. There's other people in that club, and Albert Einstein is one of them. Okay, there's no such thing as a black hole. There's no black hole in that picture. Those are plasmoids, the plasma physics phenomena. Okay, if there was any black hole in that picture, those things would be circling it or being sucked into it, and that's not what you see. Okay, the next picture shows what is called a Herbig-Haro string, named after two astronomers, those names. And here's what you're seeing. If you scroll down a little bit more, there's a somewhat more realistic, somewhat better image. The image in blue with yellow is kind of like, a radio image again. The next picture shows HH34. Okay, and you can see that. What happens with a Herbig-Haro string? You see, I said that gravity cannot form solar systems or stars up from plasma or from dust, right? What actually can form stars and protostars and other types of solid bodies up from plasma are these Birkeland currents, because where these pairs of currents cross each other, you have electrical short circuiting in what you call pinch points, the Z pinch point, and those Z pinch points do have the power to agglomerate plasma into solid material, stars, protostars, possibly also rocky bodies, although it's probably more likely that the rocky bodies are generally formed by fissioning from gas giants or dwarf stars. Okay, but a young solar system would look like this, right? It would not be an orbiting system like our present solar system. A young solar system would look like one of these Herbig-Haro strings. Okay, it would be an electromagnetically aligned kind of a thing. It wouldn't be an orbiting thing.
Well, then, as it spits this out and makes planets, they have to form into some kind of, they do form into galaxies or solar systems. Okay. How do they pull themselves back into a...
Let me scroll down a little bit further, okay?
All right.
Where it says string of galaxies.
Yeah.
What you're getting here is exactly the same thing as the picture of the Herbig-Haro string above, only on a gigantically larger scale, right? In other words, you get strings of galaxies in our universe, and these things are also created by Birkeland currents, but on a very much larger scale. See, the things which are forming in the Z-pinch of those Birkeland currents are not stars, they're entire galaxies.
Right.
So this thing is scalable. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it was on the macro and cosmos.
Yeah, okay, it's like, but with plasma physics phenomena, it's like they're always scalable. It's like they always work at whatever kind of scale. You could have the same kind of thing inside a plasma physics.
That's kind of why I asked if that's what's running through the center of our galaxy. The dark, what we could call a dark rift is actually one of these Birkeland currents.
That's
correct. Huge form.
That's exactly right. That's what that twisted pair, that's what that nebula is that runs through the center of the Milky Way galaxy now. You scroll down a little bit further, I've got a picture of one of Halton Arp's object pairs, right? Now, we were talking about like disruptive technologies, like guys getting shut down. This is a story like the fairy tale about the ugly duckling, okay? It's like we have been told all our lives that, that the universe comes from a big bang, and that
I find that hard to believe myself.
What I normally tell people is that the Big Bang idea is bad physics and bad theology rolled into a package. Okay, in other words, having all the mass of the universe collapse to a point would be the mother of all black holes, if there was such a thing as a black hole. I mean, nothing would ever bang its way out of that, number one. And number two, it's like, for a supposedly omniscient God to suddenly, at some particular point in time to decide it would be a cool thing to create a universe, whereas the idea never occurred to him previously, that's hugely problematical as well. You understand what I'm saying? Bad physics and bad theology rolled into a package, and it was never based on anything more than this idea of an expanding universe. And the expanding universe was based on interpreting cosmic redshift as velocity and distance, okay, starting in the 1920s. Now, Halton Arp blew all of that to hell. He basically managed to show, this is an American astronomer who managed to show that you've got numerous things in the universe where you have very low and very high redshift objects, which are clearly part and parcel of the same thing. Do you see this picture? It's like you've got an obvious bridge of material connecting these two things, right? And you've got...
Oh, yeah, there's definitely an exchange of mass.
Yes, these two things are in the same
form.
These two things are in the same place, and it's like they're giving off completely different signals about how far away they are, whether or not they're moving away from us or, whatever, right? So, I mean, what happens to a guy like Halton Arp when he does this? It's like he gets banned from all American observatories, right? He's no longer allowed to use American telescopes unless he goes to Walmart and buys one for himself. And then he gets picked up by the Max Planck Institute in Germany. It's like the story about the ugly duckling, who finally they figured out it wasn't even a duck at all. He was a swan. Right? Is that an interesting story, do you think?
Well, I find to me that our formation of the universe is not founded on a whole bunch of science fact. There's a lot of theories thrown in there in order to make it seem as though it's a fact.
Right.
And Carl Sagan is a good one for doing it. When some alternative thing came up, he would always come back with some other, well, if this happened this way, this is the theory now. Okay. He always debunked the electrical aspects of our universe. And everything we know about nature, it runs on electricity.
Right. Now, Carl Sagan is the chief villain in that story about Immanuel Velikovsky. I'm sure you're aware of that. It's like,
oh yeah.
Basically, I mean, when they discovered the actual conditions on Venus, like the 850 degree Fahrenheit surface temperature, there should have been a line of scientists a couple of miles long standing in front of Immanuel Velikovsky's door waiting to apologize, right? And that never happened. What did happen was that Carl Sagan very quickly fabricated this so-called super greenhouse theory, which is now the standard academic explanation for the conditions on Venus, right? And the idea is that, and this is completely harebrained, but the idea is that, radiant sunlight, comes through those, you've got like a 90 bar CO2 atmosphere on Venus, right? It comes through all of that and heats up the surface, and then that surface heat can't escape. In other words, it's reaching the surface as ultraviolet radiation. It would have to re-radiate as infrared, and it can't do it because of the CO2 clouds, right? Well, that's ludicrous. It's like there's no... we've had descender probes, both the Soviet Union and the Russians and the United States have had descender probes go to the surface of Venus. And in the middle cloud layers, there was just pitch black. There was no light at all, right? And then you had light getting brighter and increasingly bright as you got to the surface. So it's obvious enough that the light that you see at the surface of Venus is locally generated, right? In other words, it's created by intense electrical activity and by the heat and by the chemical reactions that you get near the surface of Venus, right? Any kind of a modicum of sunlight that ever got through those clouds, if it ever did, would be like a drop in the ocean compared to the locally generated light.
And anything that's been dropped on there has only lasted a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, and then it's burned out.
Yeah, you'd need a pair of asbestos BVDs, right? Now,
I think they got like 3 pictures of the actual surface, and that's about it.
Right. And this is what I tell these people who want to insist on trying to claim that the Earth is 6,000 years old. I said, we actually have one planet in our system, which is Venus, which actually is ballpark for some kind of a 6 or 10,000 year age estimate. That's what it looks like, right?
Right.
I mean,
See, that's what a lot of these. If you follow now, I've gotten into ancient history, and you can go back and you can find several cultures that say there was a time before there was a moon.
Well, there was a time before there was a sun, really.
Well, yeah. Now you got the
purple
dawn theory, which I find extremely interesting myself. I mean, there's a big possibility that that was actually what one of the cataclysms that we've went through. We went through several cataclysms.
Okay, look, if we've got 2 hours here, we'll get to that. Not to worry. It's like I didn't mean to talk about the purple dawn tonight. Just running through a couple.
I do want to talk about the electro universe theory some more, but I want to talk about the us coming from elsewhere.
That's correct. Now, look, it's like, have you ever listened to Lloyd Pye's videos or presentations?
Oh yeah. I've met Lloyd Pye, but I've never had him on the air.
Okay, I mean, Lloyd Pye...
I met him on Skype. I haven't met him personally, right, but I've talked to him.
Lloyd Pye also came to the conclusion that we would not have been adapted to the conditions on this planet 50,000 years ago at all, and could not have come from this planet. Whereas the hominids, like the Neanderthal and the Homo erectus and whatnot, were adapted to those conditions. What I recommend to people is to listen to Lloyd Pye's videos up to the point at which he starts talking about Anunnaki, and then turn them off, right? See, Troy McLaughlin's and my version of a Saturn theory does not require that anything ever came to us from the Pleiades or from interstellar space.
Right. It wasn't extraterrestrial influence. It was our own. Well,
it was influence coming from within our own system, not from the Earth itself, but
right.
But not from Alpha Centauri, or not from...
Yeah, not extra-galactic or solar.
It is possible that we could have been visited in prehistoric times by people from other star systems, right? But there's no evidence of it that I'm aware of. Okay? I mean, there is this thing they call the Fermi paradox, right? Which basically, you've got to come up with some sort of an answer to that sooner or later. Let me scroll on a little bit further. Like I say, you've got authors of dead theories from past centuries. That includes the people who talk about a Big Bang or an expanding universe. Okay, and we just came to a little point which says Ganymede Hypothesis, the basic idea. Okay, and, I wanted to call this book the Ganymede Hypothesis at first. Troy talked me out of that. This is my co-author. Okay.
Yeah, I got him coming on in November. I think November.
Okay. Well, this is very interesting. It's like Troy convinced me. It's like he said that, because of his position in Roman mythology, Ganymede is a sort of a code word in the gay community. People would be buying copies of the book for the wrong reason and getting bent out of shape, So we called the book Cosmos in Collision because that's really what you're talking about. You're talking about two entire systems basically fusing together, one being captured by the other. The basic idea of the Ganymede hypothesis are not complicated. Starting from the most common idea of solar systems forming up from swirling masses of dust or plasma, you would expect that the spin axes of the bodies in a solar system would all be roughly perpendicular to the plane of the system.
Right, the axial tilt.
Axis tilts, right? And that's not what we find within our own system. Within our own system, we've got the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury, which do look sort of like that, right? They've all got axis tilts less than 10 degrees. So I would assume that the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury are basically an original system, right? And the Sun might have captured Jupiter, but it did, somewhere, substantially before it ever captured our own part of the system. Okay, it starts to get stranger from that point. You've got, like I say, it's only the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury that have this very low axis tilt, right? You've got Venus and Uranus, which have oddball axis tilts. Each has its own separate little story. Okay, but the other four main bodies in our system, which are Neptune, Saturn, Mars, and Earth, all have this same roughly 26-degree axis tilt. 24 degrees to about 28, something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge anomaly. I mean, given any normal kind of a theory for how our solar system formed up, that's something you wouldn't expect to see, okay? You have to assume that those four bodies were captured as a group, probably recently, and then you get to this question of why being captured as a group would cause all four to have roughly the same axis tilt. The answer is as follows. Early solar systems do not form up, we've just been over this, right? We don't form up as swirling clouds of dust being acted upon by gravity. They're formed up by Birkeland currents, which you see in space like we just looked at, right? They're created by charge separation over huge distances in space. A Birkeland current, like I say, we just went over that, right? You've got like a twisted pair of currents which have these pinch points, where the two currents cross, and these pinch points can form up stars and protostars and cosmic solid bodies, right? And these things are going to be in an electromagnetic alignment. Now, what Troy and I claim the basic idea of the Ganymede hypothesis is that at a very recent point in time, the southern part of our system, which would have included Neptune, Saturn, Mars, and Earth, was still in such an electromagnetic alignment, which flew into the plane of the Sun system from the south at something like a 26-degree angle. And as these individual bodies peeled out and began to orbit the way that they do now, ordinary gyroscopic force caused them to retain that 26-degree angle of approach in the form of axis tilts. Did I just say that too fast, or is that comprehensible?
Yeah, well, it was kind of fast. I understood what you were saying. So they either were that way when they entered our system, or they were put that way.
Like I say, you had a string. You had like a string of bodies, cosmic bodies.
Right.
Uranus was probably also, like the lead, but Troy believes that Uranus was the lead body in that little group which flew into the plane of the Sun system from the south at a 26-degree angle, right? That it got knocked off of its normal orientation just by the buffeting that it would have encountered. Okay, but nonetheless, it's like you've got Neptune, Saturn, Mars, and Earth, which, which are in this straight line of bodies which flew into the Sun's system and then began to orbit. And as they began to orbit, just gyroscopic force caused them to retain this 26-degree approach angle in the form of axis tilts. That's the reason for what we see today.
So it was actually the speed of the object that caused it to stay in the position it was in.
The electromagnetic alignment, really. They were aligned by an electromagnetic force. Okay, they were being held in a straight line, more or less.
All right.
Okay. What appears to be the case is that the southern system, which is Neptune, Saturn, Mars, and Earth, some tens of thousands of years ago, was still in the form of such an electromagnetic alignment. Okay, we just went over that, right? Prehistoric double system. That also says, are you following this on the little thing that I gave you the link to?
I'm trying to.
Okay. Like I said, this is a PDF formatted file. It's a set of talking points, more or less. Prehistoric double system. That also says that before this final capture event, this is where the story gets interesting, okay? Our system was a double system with a very bright northern part, which is the Sun and Jupiter and Mercury, and a very dark southern part.
Now, Jupiter had to be a lot closer to the Sun than it is now, right?
Okay, that's correct. Not only is that what we see in our galaxy, right? The normal thing within our galaxy is
right. This is what we've discovered with the Kepler telescope, that there is giant.
Right. They have what they call hot Jupiters, which typically orbit more closely than Jupiter or Saturn do now. Okay, the normal thing in our galaxy is to see gas giants like Jupiter and Saturn in closer to a main sequence star than the situation in our own system. Okay, not only that, but John Cook, who has done some of these calculations, says that he puts Jupiter at about 0.7, astronomical units to the Sun, about 7/10 of the distance that we are from the Sun now. is where Jupiter would have been under those circumstances without those other main bodies. Okay, so that all of a sudden, you've got the possibility of something within that Jupiter moon system becoming habitable. We'll talk about that momentarily, right? That says that prior to, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just catching up mentally. It also says that prior to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It also says prior to that final capture event, our system was a double system with a very bright northern part and then a very dark southern part. Rocky bodies like Earth or Mars, aligned with a dwarf star, such as Saturn was at that time, will most often be inside the plasma heliosphere of the dwarf star. Okay, radiant energy will bounce off of the interior of that plasma heliosphere and then back onto the rocky bodies from every angle and every direction, so that something living on that body wouldn't just freeze, but the entire middle part of the light spectrum would simply be missing. Okay, this is your purple dawn age. Okay, I mean, they talk about red dwarfs and brown dwarfs, right? But it's basically, it's probably a misnomer. What you're really going to get around a dwarf star is a deep purple environment, and you're just not going to have the kind of light. You know, in other words, a Neanderthal or a Homo erectus never saw anything that we would call daylight. That's why you have these huge eyes.
Right. Well, see that was one of my things about us being, originally not from. I mean, yes, we have evolved to be part of the Earth, but I don't think originally we came. Here we're so much different from any other animal. Every other animal is suited to this environment, and we're not.
That's correct. Okay, it's like any creature has to be well suited to his home world, right? Whether you believe in evolution or whether you believe that God created the living worlds of the universe, either way. It's like God is not going
we were put together wrong for here.
God is not going to create an animal which is hideously ill-adapted to the world that he's going to put him on. I mean, God is not a sadist or anything like that. By the same token, nothing would ever evolve into a situation of complete dysfunctionality. Literature speaks of red and brown dwarf stars. Okay, you've got the notion of a purple dawn, which you read about in mythology books, which the oral traditions of the oldest human groups describe. Okay, your Native Australians, some of your Native American groups basically have folklore-type memories of a purple dawn age. Okay, amongst the old creatures of the earth, lemurs, tarsiers, bush babies, owls, leftovers from this age, you see these kinds of eyes, right? Particularly amongst dinosaurs and hominids. Yeah, the eye sockets of dinosaurs and hominids were very, very much larger than ours. Okay.
They were also positioned higher on the skull.
That's correct. Now, people have always considered the Neanderthal to be a primitive human rather than an advanced ape, right? Because of the size of their brains, which are a bit larger than ours. But our brains are dominated by the front part of the brain, which is involved with logic. Okay, the Neanderthal brain was dominated by the part of the brain involving vision, and that plus these huge eyes tells you that the Neanderthal brain was largely the neurological equivalent of the circuitry for some kind of a military night vision system. Okay, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about a creature which is splendidly adapted for this purple dawn age and for this twilight period. And of course, when you read some of the mythology books, which are easier to get your hands on, they talk about people claiming to have known an age before the sun, right? And you find that amongst the Mayans, and a number of other Central American groups as well. Okay, what Troy describes as this first near capture event is in this next picture. Okay, how did I meet Troy McLaughlin? We were discussing this purple dawn age on the forum section of David Talbot's website, which is thunderbolts.info. And the first thing I noticed was that Troy had done a fabulous job of not only reading all of Eduardo Cardona's books, but of translating them into human readable material as well as images. Right now, Eduardo's books were like trying to read a 500-page science journal article. you can imagine, right?
It's a little above most people's
very difficult
center of interest. I mean, they rather skim the details.
I mean, the average American anymore doesn't have that kind of an attention span.
No, they don't.
Right? I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm not really like a dopey person or anything. It's like, you get the idea, right? What Troy said was that this approach of the Saturnians, the Saturn, the southern part of the system, to the sun and its system was gradual, and then, but it wasn't exactly at all times, it wasn't a straight approach. It was a spiral approach, at least up until the final capture event. And there were a couple of points of near capture before this final capture occurred, right? There were a couple of, you see that in this picture where you've got the little egg shape.
Right. Well, the whole thing, we're actually running in a kind of vortex,
Right. Well, what Troy said was that you had this near capture at least once before, in other words, the two systems came very close to each other, and then the southern system spiraled back out into deep space again.
Before we go any further, something I need to clarify. You said this was a time before there was a sun. Now, there's a reason why people couldn't see the sun, right?
They were inside this plasma heliosphere of the dwarf star.
Yeah, because they were inside a little bubble-like.
Let me give you a very, very, very brief and simple-minded little.
That'd be best for our listeners.
Yeah, well, for me as well. I mean,
Well, I wanted to make sure that people understood that that they didn't think the sun wasn't there. It was there. We just couldn't see it.
Anybody who's been listening to this anybody who's been listening to this has heard me call Jupiter and Saturn dwarf stars a couple of times by now.
Right.
Okay, what's this guy talking about exactly? What exactly happens when a dwarf star is captured by a main sequence star like our sun? What they teach in schools is wrong. You've probably by now gotten a fairly good realization that a lot of the things they teach in our schools are wrong. Okay, they teach us that stars are thermonuclear engines. If a star really was a thermonuclear engine, then when a main sequence star like our sun were to capture a dwarf star like Saturn or Jupiter used to be, they would all three of them just go on being stars, right? There's no reason why anything should change very much.
Right.
Okay, but that's not the reality of it. The reality of it is that stars are basically light bulbs. They're plasma physics phenomena which are powered by these galactic, Birkeland currents. And when a dwarf star is captured by a main sequence star, what's going to happen is as if you had like a 200-foot lightning rod glowing in a storm, and while that's going on, the Acme Lightning Rod Company drives up in their truck and like 300 feet away constructs a 1,000-foot lightning rod. Right? You understand what I'm saying? What's going to happen? It's like, the 200-foot lightning rod is no longer the focus of any kind of a discharge. It's going to go out, right?
Right.
So that's why Jupiter and Saturn are gas giant planets now and no longer dwarf stars. Okay. Prior to this final capture event, Saturn was a dwarf star. And you had, you had at least one incident where the southern Saturnian system spiraled in very close to the sun system and then spiraled back off into deep space. Now, when you have these near approaches, which, we don't really have any believable way of saying how long ago that was. I mean...
Right. We only make assumptions on time.
Yeah.
We don't,
most of the books that you read which talk about Cro-Magnon man basically indicate that he came here like 45 or 50,000 years ago. Some people might say 60,000, it depends on what you want to believe. It was some very long space of time ago. Okay. When you had these near approach, at least one near approach like that, then the two rocky bodies on the outsides of these two systems would have been the Earth and Ganymede, right? Ganymede is Jupiter's largest moon. It is just a bit smaller than Mars. Okay, if it was orbiting the sun directly, you would call it a planet. Okay, Ganymede, like 50 or 60,000 years ago, would have been a freshwater ocean world. It has pretty much nearly.
This is it's inside the plasma bubble, right?
No. Ganymede is one of Jupiter's moons. Ganymede was part of the sun. Jupiter, it still is. It's part of the.
All right, I'm sorry. I got the two mixed up. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, Saturn, Mars,
Saturn and Jupiter mixed up.
Yeah, Saturn, Mars, and Earth are part of this this prehistoric southern Saturnian system. Okay, it's like the Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury. That's the northern system. That's the bright system. Okay. Humans have the smallest relative eye sizes of advanced creatures. If you've got a double system sitting there with one very bright and one very dark side to it, well, then the humans have to come from the bright side of that. Okay, this is what you see, Troy and I were originally talking about, writing a book about human origins, which would, because of these images coming back from Mars, would postulate Mars as an original home world for humans, right? And eventually, I finally started getting this stuff into my head, and I said, Troy, we're looking at this the wrong way, right? Mars was inside the same deep purple system that the Earth was in those days. It's like the humans could not have come from Mars any more than we could have come from Earth, right? Humans, if you've got like a double system here with a bright part and a dark part, the humans have to come from the bright part of the thing. Maybe some kind of like another body orbiting the sun, which got blown up or destroyed or something, right? And at that point, Troy went into a kind of a study of Jupiter and Ganymede. And he told me at the time, he said that if anything ever started to look like he was trying to pound a square peg into a round hole or anything, he would drop that idea, right? But he said that it never did. He said the thing fell together almost like, the pieces of a puzzle, like, one of these, when you hear one of these grandmasters, chess masters talk about a game which plays itself, right? In other words, it turns out Ganymede, there's every reason to believe, would have had everything that modern humans need for an original home world. Okay, it was there's almost no sodium around Ganymede, right? It would have been a freshwater ocean world. It's got oxygen, it's got an intrinsic magnetosphere. Those are the two main things that humans need just to protect us from, something to breathe, right, and something to protect us from like cosmic radiation, right? It's like
right. Well, water is a good protector.
Right. So you've got everything that you need, right? What they teach about Ganymede is that, they claim now that it has a 600-kilometer deep outer mantle of salt water. And why are they saying that? They're trying to explain two things. They're trying to explain this ultra-low moment of inertia, the fact that the mass of Ganymede is concentrated towards the center. And they're also trying to explain this intrinsic magnetosphere via a dynamo effect, which you would want salt water for. But that doesn't really work, right? It's like it's not big enough for anything like that. And, they claim that the Earth's magnetosphere is also generated by a dynamo effect. That doesn't work for us either, right? It's like if that were the case, it would be topped off continually. It wouldn't be weakening. And we know that our own, magnetosphere is weakening.
Yeah, that is definite. It's been weakening for years.
Okay. So,
for eons, I should say.
What Troy finally came to was that, like, what you've really got on Ganymede is like a very deep outer mantle, not of salt water, of pumice, right, which is lighter than water. Floats,
yeah.
Okay, so that you've got this you've got this deep outer mantle of pumice. You had in past ages both anchored islands and floating, coagulated bergs of pumice with luxuriant vegetation. You've still got these dark areas on the top of the ice on Ganymede, which, if you had ice sitting on top of an outer mantle of water, you wouldn't have anything that looked like a continent on it, but you've got continents on Ganymede, and Troy could talk about that. Troy really did most of the work as far as astronomy, understanding Ganymede. I did most of the work as far as understanding hominids and, Cro-Magnon humans and all the things involving human origins, right? I don't think either one of us really could have produced this book on our own, or at least it would have taken 20 years if one of us did.
I'm interested in both of them subjects personally because, like I said, I think we came from somewhere else. I think we're actually hybrided into the ecosystem so we can survive here. How we got here now, that's the question.
Okay, humans survive in this world via technology. It's like there's never been an exception. It's always been the case. We're not physically adapted to this world. Okay, so that somewhere along about 45 or 50 or 60,000 years ago, you had this first group of humans transferring from Ganymede to the Earth, and then this southern system swung back out into deep space, and those guys were trapped, right? I mean, they had no way of getting home.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? The question is like, how would, I'm going to get people asking me another question about this, and I've the newest edition of the book.
Once the system joined into the later system, the actual sun's heliosphere, which we're in the atmosphere of the sun.
Yeah.
Once this other system passed into it, how much longer afterward would Ganymede become uninhabitable?
Probably didn't take very long.
It would have cooled off rather quickly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it became we've got people on YouTube that are claiming that Ganymede is still inhabited, right? And it appears to me that Mars still is inhabited. You've got small animals.
Well, I believe that too myself, but I'm talking about on a civilization level, like we have. They wouldn't have been able to live out,
No, it's very hard to picture anything
longer, like... because they wouldn't be adapted to the actual sunshine.
It's very hard to picture. Very hard to picture any sort of a civilization on Ganymede right now. Right. It's like what you had happen. See, these first humans that came to Earth were culturally sophisticated, but not technologically sophisticated. We have no reason to believe that they came here via any kind of technological means. What Don Scott, one of the electrical engineers with the Thunderbolts group, ran by me, which makes perfect sense, is that you would have had a water bridge for, because of the different electrical potentials of Ganymede and Earth. When the two of those bodies got too close, you would have had an electrical, potential difference between the two and a water bridge forming between the two. You would have had and this is where, I really could use Cecil B. DeMille on my side. Because this would make the most fabulous movie that you could possibly imagine. You've got these people.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean,
you've got these people splashing around.
We got about 3.5 minutes before the break, and I want to make sure people can find you. You want to tell them where they can find your website and your YouTube channel, and your book.
Yeah. Okay. On my most basic website.
We'll pick up the water bridge after the break.
My most basic website is called bearfabrique.org, like a bear in the woods, and then the ordinary European word for factory, fabrique, like you're going to fabricate something, .org, like an organization, bear, and then fabrique with French spelling, Fabrique, BEAR, Fabrique.org. Okay, and you've got links to pretty nearly everything that I've been talking about today, including this little 2-hour session that we're doing, down at the bottom, bearfabrique.org, down at the bottom, there's a thing that says Revolution Radio A, right?
Yeah, I'll put that with it when I make a video of it. I'll put that link with it.
Okay, and for sure, I could use a copy. Oh
yeah, I'll send you a link of it.
Okay, other things to be aware of. There's a Ganymede Hypothesis channel on YouTube. And there's a Facebook page called Ganymede Hypothesis, which got like about 1,150 members now. It's getting there slowly but surely.
I went over there and joined it yesterday or the day before.
Right. Now, it's interesting to say the least.
Well, I find this stuff all intriguing, and it doesn't really matter if it's true or not, as long as it makes you start looking at things and thinking about stuff.
It's the kind of thing that makes people rich and famous 40 years after they die. Okay?
Yeah. Like Velikovsky, I mean.
Yeah.
When he was alive, they just ate him up and tried their darndest to make him discredit him in every way they could. And now
it's like, I don't want to have to tell St. Peter that all I ever did was like, write computer software for 40 years. You understand what I'm saying? It's, that's I'm perfectly good with that. It's like, somebody else can get rich 40 years after I die.
Well, if you're looking to get rich, then you'd went through college and become a professor and toe the company line,
Yeah. At any rate, that's what's happening. Did you say you had like a commercial break or?
Yeah, it's fixing to run here. Just so we'll hear when it comes on.
Okay.
The music will start playing.
Right. Now this is intriguing.
I like this stuff. This is my cup of tea. I believe that we have to keep an open mind, and science wants to shut the door, and I don't understand that when they're supposed to. I'm not sure what happened there. Well, I want to remind everybody this is Revolution.Radio, and we are totally listener supported. So if you got a chance, come on down to the homepage, which you can find at Revolution.Radio or at www.freedomslips.com, and check out the chat room. It's going pretty good in there. Let's see, there's probably, 164 people in the chat room. That ain't bad for Monday evening. Got some comments.
No, that's pretty fair.
Yeah, it's a Monday night, and people like kicking back. They don't want to hang in the chat room a lot of times. but we're discussing I'm probably pronouncing the name of this planet or moon wrong. Ganymede Hypothesis.
Okay, Troy says Ganymede, right? But to me, I have a hard time with that. I would just say Ganymede. I would have to hear a real Greek pronounce it.
I've been living in the South so long I trip over my tongue all the time.
Right. Are you from the South? Or?
No, I'm from up north, believe it or not, from New York, but I live in the South. I enjoy the South.
Okay, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. I moved here to Southeast Texas about 6 years ago.
And I lived in Maryland, in Rockville for a few years during the Kennedy era.
Okay, Rockville is a very hard place to live anymore. That's really a dangerous place to try to drive or do anything much. There's like 5 or 6 driving situations around D.C. which I regard as unacceptably dangerous. Rockville Pike is, that's very hard on anybody's nerves to drive from one end of Rockville Pike to another, around lunchtime.
My oldest son still lives up there, just outside of Rockville now. I've never been there since he's moved there, but he lives up there now.
Right. Anyway, are we back on the air here?
Yeah, we're back on the air. I want to let everybody know that you can follow along with what he's talking about at Bear Fabricate. I can't pronounce that. It's BEARFABRIQUE.org, and he's got a little thing there, and we've gone down to where it says humans, so it's probably about 7 or 8 pages down.
I have a Bear Fabrique. Like
there you go. That's how you pronounce it.
Bearfabrique.org. Okay, you go to bearfabrique.org, and then down at the bottom, like second item from the bottom, there's a thing which says, Revolution Radio A.pdf. Click on that, right? And it's like you'll be into this thing that we're looking at. It's got pictures, and it's got like basically just talking points or just a sort of a narrative. And we've spoken about the event in which the first group of humans that came to the Earth arrived on Earth, right? These people.
Right. Now, you mentioned what this kind of intrigues me, a water bridge.
Okay, Don Scott told
me
about that.
We know that the Earth has 2 types of water. We got salt water and we got fresh water.
Well, let me tell you something funny. The salt, before the flood, the water on the Earth wasn't salty. Okay, it's like even Velikovsky said that there's no source for the salt in our oceans.
Right. That's one of the things I was going to mention that okay. we don't know where all the salt comes from.
Yeah, the salt arrived with the flood. Okay, and that's another whole topic in itself. It's like, what is the story about Noah and the flood about?
Right.
The question of humans, the first humans that came here were, they were culturally sophisticated. They were not technologically sophisticated. No reason to believe that they had space vehicles or firearms or anything like that, right? They they sort of plopped down here. I'll get to that shortly. Like I said, the most likely way that they would have transferred from Ganymede to Earth at that initial near approach would have involved what Don Scott what was talking about, which is a water bridge which forms between. You can take two glasses of water and sit, fill to the brim and sit them like maybe half an inch, 3/4 of an inch, or an inch away from each other, and put electrical currents into them, and you will get one of these water bridges forming from the one to the other. And you can just get on YouTube and type in electrical water bridge, and you can see that right there. There are numerous little takes on that on YouTube. So at any rate, you have this first group of people. They're sitting in this ocean world of theirs. You've got a freshwater ocean world where they've got all these wonderful fruits that grow on these pumice islands, right? And then they go into the water. It's like, they're spending most of their lives in water. And we'll get to that here.
Well, see, that would explain a few things like the webbing between our feet, fingers, and toes.
Well, look, it's like, I don't want to trip over myself like a little bit further down here. It's like Elaine Morgan spoke of an aquatic ape, right? An aquatic ape theory. Mm-hmm. And she mentioned that we share 100 different characteristics with the aquatic mammals. What all does that include? It includes a whole list of things, right? Voluntary control over breathing. That's, that's an aquatic adaptation. So you hold your breath underwater, right?
Yeah,
that
right.
lets
monkeys can't do that.
No, monkeys and apes cannot. They can make all kinds of noise, but they do not have voluntary control over breathing. That's the only reason that they cannot teach chimpanzees and gorillas to speak English. Okay, they can teach gorillas and chimpanzees deaf signs, that they can learn those perfectly well, and they can communicate. And one of the gorillas that they taught deaf signs to on several occasions took human IQ tests and achieved scores between 75 and 90. And that's adequate for half of the jobs in the world. Okay?
Yeah, I hear that now.
You've got people that don't do that well for themselves. Okay, you've got whole nations whose average IQ is below that. So you've got that, right? You've got subcutaneous fat, right, which is also an adaptation for an aquatic environment. The monkeys and apes don't have that. You've got the question of face-to-face sex, right? That's something which the aquatic mammals do.
None of the monkeys or animals do that.
No, it's just humans on Earth. You've got this nearly complete lack of a decent sense of smell. Okay, I mean, we have a sense of smell, but it's nowhere close to being adequate for surviving as a land prey animal when you've got wolves and hyenas and lions running around. Okay, if you were to give deer our sense of smell, deer would become extinct within 3 weeks. Okay, whereas an aquatic mammal doesn't require a decent sense of smell.
Right, well, in the ocean, it's more taste than the smell.
Right, and there's a whole list of things like that, right? Now,
well, yeah, when we're not clothed, we have to clothe ourselves from the environment. I mean, that's something that,
There are two ways you could look at Elaine Morgan's theory. You could look at it as a new version of evolutionism, in which case it's just a new flavor of BS. Or you could look at it as a theory of human adaptation. And if you look at it that way, it's the best theory that's ever come down the road. But it's never gotten any traction in academia, and there's two reasons for that, right? It's like, there's no physical evidence of it. There's no fossil evidence of an aquatic ape in the world that anybody's ever found, right?
Right.
And the other thing is that there's never been a body of water on this world.
Well, she based her whole theory on one group of apes that happened to wade in the water.
Yeah, I'm saying there's never been a body of water on this planet that would be safe for humans to live in. Okay,
I don't think so.
No. You only need to spend 10 minutes in the ancient sea monster section of the Smithsonian Museum to comprehend why humans don't live in water.
Now, would they have been here before us? Or all these sea monsters, these animals? Because now there's a big significant difference. Now, evolution calls for everything being gigantic at one time, and then everything's scooting down in size to the present day size of stuff. The only animal that they don't contribute the same step down in height and size is the humans.
you've had giant humans and giant hominids in past ages, but I don't have any reason to believe that humans, on average, were ever much different in size than we are now. Okay, it's like the question of, have you ever heard the thing about me and dinosaurs and gravity and weightlifting? Or
yeah, well, see, that was one of the other things. I mean, something had to be different.
Yeah, it's like the large
drastically different.
Yeah. Well, remember I said that Albert Einstein was also a member of this club. I mean, Albert Einstein tried to describe gravity as a four-dimensional differential geometry kind of a thing. And you cannot start with that and believe that gravity could ever have made any kind of a 3-to-1 change near the surface of our own planet. But it's an easy demonstration that it has, and that these large dinosaurs be crushed by their own weight in our present world. They never experienced gravity like we do at all. And that basically says that gravity is not a basic force in nature. It's an electrostatic dipole effect. And that's a long story. I mean, we don't really have time to get in. We don't have time to get into that tonight, right? It's like, basically, what I tell people, I mean, math majors normally minor in physics. Physics bored me at that. I wasn't really interested in physics in those days when I was in school, right? I mean, I minored in modern languages. But nonetheless, the one thing that I've ever really done in life which has much of anything to do with physics is just something which gets physicists pissed off, right? Because they worship this Albert Einstein and this whole thing about dinosaurs and gravity.
Well, he was actually a friend of Velikovsky's.
Yeah, I know. In fact, at Princeton University, I mean, you may have actually, I don't know if you all ever had all three of these guys together at the school at any one time, but within a fairly short space of time, you had Immanuel Velikovsky and then Albert Einstein and then Julian Jaynes, all, and at that point, you don't even need a football team, right? I mean, you could probably fill the football stadium just for some kind of a discussion with those three guys if you ever had them all sitting there at the same time. Any rate, no, that's interesting stuff. Let me talk about humans, okay? It's like, so we've gotten some idea of what these first group of, they're splashing around in water, right? And they're throwing beach balls to each other and all this kind of good stuff. And then some kind of like a tube opens up in the sky above them, and they get sucked into another world, right? Can you imagine what Cecil B. DeMille would do with that?
Well, see, now you got other species here that are kind of the same way. I mean, you have dolphins, you have the octopus. They believe is some kind of alien critter.
I would assume that dolphins and seals and things like that came with us and came with those first humans from Ganymede. Okay.
Now that I wouldn't doubt. Like I said, they they're so much different than the rest of the ecology.
Yeah. There's no reason to believe that everybody or everything that got sucked off away like that would have survived it, right? But some of them did.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I believe that. I mean, we had. I mean, you don't even know if we could actually eat the animals that were here.
Right. Humans and dolphins have the smallest relative eye sizes of advanced creatures. You have to assume they rose within the bright side of that ancient doubled system. There was one particular place within that ancient northern system that is Jupiter's largest moon, Ganymede, which would have been a freshwater ocean world under those conditions with both islands and floating bergs of pumice and luxuriant vegetation, a sort of an ideal home world for humans. Okay?
Well, you wouldn't have a problem with overweighted people either. I mean, the water would be buoyant, and it wouldn't.
Right. Okay. Saturn theories. This is the next little topic down. I'm still going through this little thing that you've got here, right? It's like Saturn.
I'm right there with you.
Okay. The Holden and McLaughlin version, Theodore Holden, Troy McLaughlin version versus other versions of a Saturn theory. What is it that I like about Troy's and my version? Of course, obviously I have a vested interest in it, right? But what is it that separates our version of this thing from other versions? Mainly this local genesis of everything that we see around us, within our own solar system as a Herbig-Haro object string. No talk about anything being captured, or dwarf stars being captured from cosmic distances or interstellar distances. Okay? Let me give you the logic of this. How old do you think the Earth is? I mean, if you really...
If I had to put a date on it, I would say, shoot, it's got to be, 100 million, 500 million years old? I think it's really old.
I don't think so. Let me run my version of this by you, okay? And then compare that to.
Let me put it this way. Now, as far as man goes, I think he's that old. Now, I don't know. Like I said, I don't think he was come from here. So,
let me run this by you. We're fine. We know that we've got the one planet in our system which is 6 or 8 or 10,000 years old, which is Venus, right? We know what Venus looks like. Earth and Mars.
It's a young planet.
Yeah, the Earth and Mars don't look like that at all. They have to be substantially older than that, but they're not hundreds of millions of billions of years old. Okay, we are starting to find soft tissue and dinosaur remains now, and it's not just that one T-Rex, that the lady over there at NC State was originally working with, Mary.
I know.
Okay. There's like about 35 or 40 different dinosaur specimens. They found one with skin cells intact.
Right.
Well, they find them.
They found several dozen so far now.
Yeah, with blood and with collagen and with various types of soft tissue, which isn't going to survive even 1 million years, much less 65 million years. Okay. Like I say, they've actually got good radiocarbon dates for some of those remains, and those dates come in a range of about 20,000 to 40,000 years.
Right.
Now, what I would do, which is to assume that the geologists at least got their ratios somewhere close to being ballpark for reality, is to take that 40,000 year figure and assume that that might be a begin date for dinosaurs, the outside figure, and plug that into your normal.
Well, now that I wouldn't doubt either. There's a difference between when life started and when the planet started.
Yeah.
Well, it was personally my personal opinion. I think we've made it this far in society before. We've been to Mars, we've been to the moon, and we keep knocking ourselves back to the Stone Age. That's just my personal opinion. But
yeah,
it's not surprising to me that dinosaurs ain't as old as what they say.
Let me get back to the idea of how old the Earth is. What I think you can do is just for a ballpark.
Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from.
Okay, allowing for even one cosmic catastrophe within the history of our solar system, it basically kills off all of these assumptions which the dating schemes that you've read about all your life are based on.
Right.
Okay. Now, what I think you can do is you can take this 40,000 year figure and plug that into the little 24-hour clock model of the age of the Earth, which says that if the Earth is 24 hours old, then dinosaurs appear at 10:45 p.m. And if you do that, then you get a number like about 720,000 years, which to me is reasonable enough. And if you multiply that by 5 or 10 to give the evolutionites every possible shot, then you get a number like, a couple million, 3, 4, 5, 10 million years, right? So you've got a number somewhere between a few 100,000 years and a few million years, but probably not as much as 10 million years, okay? Now, why am I interested?
For evolution to happen on Earth.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm saying that's for the age of the Earth, right? And forget about evolution. It's like, the assumption I was making was that this 40,000 year figure was a start date for dinosaurs. And if that's the case,
right,
then like I say, it's what I would tell people is that all you can really do as far as how old the Earth is to make a reasonable guess, and that's my reasonable guess. Okay, in other words, I would say the Earth is probably somewhere between 700,000 and 5 or 10 million years old. Now, what does that do to the question of these other Saturn theories? That's what I was trying to get around to.
Right.
Okay, you've got...
that puts it into our history.
That says anything trying to get to the Earth, even from as far away, from as close even as Alpha Centauri, is going to take more than that amount of time to get here, right?
Right, yeah. Extra-galactic is a lot of space.
So this is the reason that I like Troy's and my version of this better than I like the versions of a Saturn theory, which have Saturn coming in from one of the satellite galaxies or something from cosmic distances. That I don't like. At any rate, so Saturn theories, right? These are just a few links that I have listed here. Lightning rod analogy, okay, we've talked about that. Thunderbolts.info, David Talbot's site, you should be aware of that. That's called www.thunderbolts.info. Symbols of an Alien Sky. This is David Talbot and Eduardo Cardona and Wal Thornhill talking about the recent past. So this is not, they're not talking about 10, 15. You see, it's like with Cosmos and Collision, Troy and I are talking about, 50,000 years to like maybe 10 or 12,000 years ago, right? David Talbot's talking about the last 3 or 4, 5,000 years. Remember I said that you've got this thing which the Muslim symbol is based on, right, which is a crescent moon. This little picture that I have which says Shamesh, Chemash. Are you with me? Hello?
I'm on mute.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought it was
I'm following right along with you. The symbols that fascinates me. That all over the world you find the same basic symbols.
Yeah, this symbol here is the you've got the Babylonian Shamesh glyph, right, which is the item on the right, which is it's the basis for this Muslim symbol, which shows what looks to be a crescent moon and then a star inside the crescent moon. But the thing you see on the left there is really what the artists were seeing. In other words, the people that drew this thing on the right were looking at the thing on the left. You've got like a still, even after this whole, for a short period of time, even after the southern system had been captured by our present sun, you've got still this electromagnetic alignment with, Saturn, and then blue or turquoise is Venus, and then red is Mars. And then we're looking straight up at the center of all of that. And you've got a crescent which shows on Saturn, which is probably the shadow of the Earth, or conceivably the shadow of something else. I don't know, but it's like you've got this thing which is the basis of the Muslim symbol here. So it's like, the Muslim symbol is not like a moon symbol, it's a Saturn symbol. Shamesh, right, which the Babylonians, in the Old Testament, Chemash, right, the abomination of one of those cities. Right, Saturn had different names according to where you were in the ancient, Near East.
Yeah,
right?
each culture had its own name for the gods, and they were considered gods.
Yeah, called the abomination of Moab, right? The Israelites were the first group of people that figured out that they shouldn't be worshiping dwarf stars beyond some point. Right, people were sacrificing children to these things. Right, you had 3 aspects to one of the pantheon gods. You had the cosmic object which was associated with the name for the pantheon god, which could be Baal or Shamesh or Moloch. Right, you had the internal voices, which Julian Jaynes described, the origin of consciousness, and then you had these idols which the people worshipped, which they sacrificed children to. I'm just providing a set of links here. Mars images on my little website. It says bearfabrique.org, blackspace.htm, our Black Op manned space program, right? There's every reason to believe that we've got people on Mars at present. In fact, what I tell people is that nobody makes a vehicle that could roll around Baltimore, for 3 years without any kind of maintenance.
Or that shuts down on itself and then turns back on.
Why would you want to believe that anybody can make a vehicle that could roll around Mars for 10 or 12 years without maintenance? Creatures would still live on Mars. Okay, what I believe is going on, they've never rebuilt the surface of Mars. These creatures are living, including indigenous people, by the way, are living underground most of the time, right? I believe that they're coming out around noontime for maybe 30 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour for sunlight and vitamin D. Right here you've got a little ground squirrel. This image has gone viral on the internet. All you have to do is get on Google or YouTube.
Now, some of them believe that was taken at NASA's test site at that island in Canada, and it's supposed to be some kind of linneman. I can't pronounce it. Lemur. Yeah, and but I don't know how true it is, but it's definitely there.
Lemming. Yeah, the animal you'd be talking about would be a lemming, and lemmings don't look like that.
There you go.
This is a ground squirrel, and there's no place anywhere in those northern islands that looks like the topography that you get on Mars that shows in these NASA images, okay? This is a squirrel. And I've had friends who thought I was jerking them for years about these Mars images. Looked at that and said, geez, Ted, that's a squirrel. I said, no kidding, right?
There's definitely something alive, you know.
Yeah, okay, that's a ground squirrel.
Now, I personally, like I said, I believe we've had a presence on Mars, and I do believe there's an indigenous species up there of intelligent life.
Okay, and I don't know about angelic life. It's like, the one thing I would tell you is that, like...
Well, I don't know about angelic, but I said intelligent.
Okay, intelligent. I'm sorry. Yeah. I would tell you that, like, I would bet heavily against the idea of a human astronaut surviving a 10 or 11 or 12-month trip to Mars on anything which was powered by rocket engines. I think they've got something which is a whole lot more advanced than rocket engines involved in this.
I have no doubt of that. I mean, we've talked to so many people that,
Have you talked to anybody about the TR-3B?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, you know what that is, right? I believe that's...
Right. If you go out to Area 51, it takes off every Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Or it comes in for a landing every Wednesday night.
That's probably an interstellar vehicle. Okay.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean... I do believe that most of what we call UFOs are our own.
Oh, yeah. The next little picture that I've had is a mind bender. Okay, this is the girl in the yellow smock. This is like from, was it 1298, right? At any rate.
Yeah, now that picture there, you've actually taken and showed that picture without her in it at a different angle, and you can see that, whatever was there has moved.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's like, people like to try to claim that all you're seeing is a rock there, right? Rocks don't get up and walk away because it got to be dinner time or time to go to bed, right? Little girls do that, right? So you've got like two pictures of this exact same spot taken a day and a half or 2 days apart. And the one picture, the little girl is sitting right there, and the other picture, she's not there, right? So that there's no real way to claim. And this picture, which shows the yellow smock and the blue, is, this is not painted in. This is just global color, global enhancements.
For somebody trying to catch up with us, we're right at the top of page 9 on this little PDF, by the way.
Yeah. Okay.
The image comes from Mars Anomaly, which is a Facebook group, and it's and a YouTube group. So I'm not sure if they have any gigapans or not, but I go up to gigapan myself.
Okay, look, you've got like, let me tell you what I think is going on with Facebook. You've got a dozen Facebook groups which are completely dedicated to going over these Mars images, these NASA JPL images, pixel by pixel. NASA's just a government agency. They do not have the number of eyes to do that, right? It's like, I believe they're using the Facebook groups. They feed some of this stuff to the Facebook groups, and I think they're using the Facebook groups to catalog this stuff. See, the Facebook groups do have the number of eyes to do that, and to make a catalog of these images.
Right. I go up and look at the stuff myself, and I've seen quite a bit. I mean, I wouldn't go and, post it or anything.
If I had to recommend one of those images, it would be Martine Greiny's, or one of those Facebook groups, rather. I'm saying it would be Martine Greiny's group, which is called Martian Genesis. Okay, but again, Troy and I don't believe that the genesis of modern humans comes from Mars. We believe it comes from Ganymede, and that you had people from Ganymede at some later time getting to Mars and setting up the civilization, which we find the remnants of. Right. Okay, on Facebook, Facebook groups for Ganymede Hypothesis, YouTube, the YouTube channel for the Ganymede Hypothesis, and then the paperback second edition. Okay. Lulu, an ebook, right? Modern Humans. Okay, and this is where the thing starts to get interesting, right? It's like in the case of Modern Humans, what Troy and I come up with is not exactly Genesis, but it's closer to Genesis than to any kind of a book on evolutionary biology. Okay, there appear to be two basic human groups on the planet now. People descended from Adam and Noah, which is most of us, and then Pre-Adamite or Cro-Magnon man, which is what you would call the indigenous peoples of the earth, you know, the Australian Aborigines, the Ainu, the Polynesians, right? You know, the Basque people, like in northern Spain, southern France.
You're mainly pointing out the O negative or the.
No, I wasn't able to get any kind of a read on like RH negative. Blood type is any kind of a dividing line. There isn't any clear dividing line. Okay, this is not about race or color. Okay, it appears to me to be the case that either group is capable of producing any color or any feature that you'd ever see amongst modern humans.
Yeah.
Okay, there's very, very little genetic variation amongst modern humans compared to the situation with most animals, right? So that genetically the two groups are, for all intents and purposes, they're the same, but the original cultures and technologies were completely and totally different because of the gigantic span of time between the two saltations, right? That's the difference that I see, and there's some markers of that. The people before Genesis, right? What is it about the Bible and leftover Cro-Magnon people? Okay, the Bible treats leftover Cro-Magnons as non-people, right? You have to infer their existence. You have to read between the lines to infer their existence. Okay, you know, the first part of Genesis describes Adam and Eve and reads as if to mean that Adam and Eve were the first two humans ever to live on Earth. That's what most people read. That's what most people get out of that. Yet a slightly more alert reader will notice the following shortly after the story of the creation of Adam and Eve, right? The Lord, you know, the story of Cain, right? He killed his brother, right? It's like, where does Cain's wife comes from? She's a leftover Cro-Magnon, right? Who is Cain worried about killing him when supposedly he and Adam and Eve are the only three humans alive on the earth, right? Well, I mean, it says the Lord set a mark upon Cain lest any finding him should kill him, right? Well, I mean, what's he worried about? A biblical purist will claim, oh, he's worried about Adam and Eve having other children, and maybe one of them might go and kill Cain. No, that's ridiculous. I mean, they could just as easily tell any other children they might have just to leave Cain alone, right? That's not hard.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? That's
yeah, he was vanished to the land of Nod, and he made the first city according to the book. And
yeah, that would be
where the other people come from.
Yeah, that would be grasping at straws. Genesis 4 reads entirely as if there were other people living on Earth at the time when Cain slew Abel. The Old Testament, being generally laconic, does not bother to explain things which are assumed to be common knowledge.
Well, it talks of two different times when he created man, too.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, Troy and I use the term, which is an outdated word. It's like, you know, the academia frowns on talking about Cro-Magnons. We use the term Cro-Magnon as a synonym for Pre-Adamite. Right now, the word Pre-Adamite is politically incorrect now since it was used in racist tracts not very long ago. The term Cro-Magnon is fallen into disuse.
Well, we're not too politically correct around here. So.
No. Oh, that's good, because you wouldn't be able to tolerate me for very long if you were. Okay, the term Cro-Magnon has fallen into disuse because scientists could never agree as to what groups to include. The terms that they like now, Troy and I don't like, right? The terms they like now are anatomically modern human, or AMH, or early modern human, EMH. And the acronyms, okay, the problem with that is that they're trying to lump modern humans, you know, Cro-Magnon man, in with these gracile hominids that Danny Vendermini likes to talk about, the school Kafsa hominids. To me, that's wrong. To me, the school, it's obvious enough, the school Kafsa hominids are just other hominids. They're not people. Troy and I use the term, okay, Cro-Magnon to indicate people living prior to Adam, although, like I said, no way to tell how. You know, we've got one little bit of a conundrum which says there may have been more than one saltation of these people before Adam and Eve on the Earth. You may have had people transferring to the Earth from other inhabited bodies before all of these catastrophes, right?
Right.
You know, that I don't have a handle on. Okay, standard theories have Cro-Magnon man arising like 45,000 years ago. Remnant Cro-Magnons, leftover Cro-Magnons, probably account for the non-people who Cain was worried about. There's no continuum between Cro-Magnon man and the people of Genesis. Okay, there's no reasonable way to believe that Adam and Eve were descended from Cro-Magnons. If there had been, there is a list of things which Jewish literature and other Western literatures would have to know about, and that knowledge simply is not there. That list would include stone tools. Okay, I don't believe there was ever any kind of a Stone Age amongst the people of Genesis, or metal technology from day one as per Genesis 4, right, tubal cane. The atlatl, well, the boomerang as well, right, but the atlatl, particularly the signature weapon of Cro-Magnon man. Aztecs were still using atlatls against the Spanish, and native Australians are still using it to hunt kangaroos today. Right.
What he's talking about is he's talking about a way of propelling a spear faster than throwing it by hand, right?
Very much faster and harder. Okay, it's like the
right.
atlatl.
So I wanted to make sure they understood what it was.
Okay, the atlatl is a fearful weapon. It's like, it works on the same principle as a hard serve in tennis. If you've ever watched Andy Roddick or Roscoe Tanner hit a hard serve, then you know exactly how an atlatl works. It's like Roscoe Tanner would be trading 5 inches of wrist motion for like 4.5 feet of racket head motion in the blink of an eye, right? And that was going to send a tennis ball across the net at 140 miles an hour. Now, an atlatl is the exact same thing, except you don't have, you have a straight stick with a barb at the end of it, right? And then you've got about a 6 foot long spear with an indentation in the back of the spear and feathers, right? And you're you're putting this barbed point.
It's a hell of an improvement on throwing a spear is what it is.
And we were talking about
that. Up.
We were discussing that like on the group like the last couple of days, right? Jill Holland and I, and like I'd posted a sort of a YouTube link to a story about Alexander the Great, right, and his auxiliary troops and the troops that he used for projectile weapons, which included archers as well as people with javelins and a couple of other kinds of things, right? And the atlatl is a vastly more serious weapon than a javelin. I mean, Alexander was always on the lookout for new types of projectile weapons, and he had the whole Eurasian continent to choose from, and the idea of an atlatl just completely eluded him, right? Like I said, the weapons of the Bible are the sword, the spear, the sling, and the bow, right? Neither the Bible nor any other kind of Western literature knows anything about atlatls. What other kinds of things are there that don't, memories of which you don't have in the Western world, which these Cro-Magnon people were familiar with? Hominids, particularly the Neanderthal, which Basque folklore refers to as a Bathawan. Okay, Cro-Magnon man fought a Paleolithic world war which generally exterminated all hominids from the planet other than for very few isolated small groups. And you may still have the Bigfoot walking around, in the 65% of the surface, the land area of the world, which is seen only from the air, right? But it's like, I wouldn't want to have to put money on that one way or another. Do you get people talking about Bigfoot on your show?
Oh yeah. I've talked to quite a few people about Bigfoot. Personally, I think he's a leftover.
Okay, if he is. Well, the funny thing is that, like, the Neanderthal would have been probably the Eskimo of the hominid world. You didn't have like 10-foot.
Well, they grew up in modern. Well, I don't know. I'll call them modern man out of Africa, and then the Neanderthals were in Europe, which is a totally different ecosystem.
Yeah, they were adapted to the Ice Age, right? But I don't think Neanderthals got much taller than about 6 foot, right? But I mean, a male Neanderthal could be 5'8" or 5'9" or 5'10" and weigh 320 pounds without any fat on him. Okay, so you're talking about the absolute perfect.
Yeah, they were more robust and.
Yeah, you're talking about the absolute perfect middle guard for a football team. Like that's your defensive equivalent of a wishbone quarterback, right? Anyway. A purple dawn age, or perpetual twilight before the final capture of the Saturnian southern part of our system, which included Mars, Earth. What did I just do? Okay, I mean, I'm losing information as I come across pages, which included Mars and Earth. I should have a period after that. Okay, I've got the link to the little thing about Alexander here, which I mentioned. Okay, and then I get to another biggie, which works the other way, right? It's like if there'd ever been any kind of a continuum between Cro-Magnon man and the people of Genesis, right? Then there's one overwhelmingly huge thing which Cro-Magnon man would have to have had. That is the wheel, right? None of the Cro-Magnon descended groups on the Earth appear to have ever had wheels for transportation. I mean, some of them have had like pottery wheels. Okay. If I put myself in the position of Buffalo Hump or one of these great Comanche chieftains, the first thing I would do would be to invade some little West Texas town, right? Kidnap the wheelwright and haul him off to Comanche territory, right? And force him to divulge everything in the world he knew about making wheels. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. Okay, well, you can understand.
You find that in several cultures they didn't have the wheel.
Yeah, the Spaniards,
well, they did, but they didn't utilize the wheel.
No. The Spaniards were totally flummoxed by this lack of wheels amongst an otherwise terribly sophisticated group of people in Central and South America that had cities, right, and had pyramids and had every other kind of thing, right? There's one way to explain a group of people not having wheels, which would arise from cosmos and collision and the Ganymede Hypothesis. If your ancestors had just spent the last 20,000 or 100,000 years living in water, the idea of a wheel,
they had no need for a wheel.
The idea of a wheel might never occur to you. Okay, the Ganymede Hypothesis has implications to other kinds of things. Like the human diet, right? What kinds of things humans were eating originally. It's like they would have been eating a combination of fruit and shellfish. They were coming up on these pumice islands and bergs and picking fruit off the trees, right? Humans don't swim as efficiently as dolphins or seals do, right? It's like, for humans to be spending like 10 or 15 or 20 hours a day in water, you're talking about burning a lot of energy. Okay, and that's the problem with the American diet today. We still have this taste for sweet things, from this original fruit diet, but we're not getting all that exercise anymore.
That's definite. We sit in front of the computers or the TV.
Right. Right. I mean, the American diet is capable of destroying the world. That's something has to give with that one. At any rate.
Well, now you've pointed out that the difference but the difference between the Cro-Magnon and modern human, now they've got DNA evidence that proves that there is some inbreeding between these two species.
Okay, and when you're talking about Cro-Magnons are modern people, okay, the Cro-Magnon man is a perfectly modern human. I mean, the descendants of the Cro-Magnon people are just going to be your indigenous people of the Earth. It's going to be like descendants of Mayans.
Well, I meant the Neanderthal man.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to get into that here. Okay. Don't worry. I'm going to get in. We're going to talk about Neanderthals. How much time do we have here? We've still got
about 25 minutes.
Okay, we've got time. Don't worry. I mean, the Neanderthal is one of my favorite subjects. I mean, that's like that's a trip and a half. Okay. First off, what do we know about Cro-Magnon man? I mean, you can read this, right? It's like you've got experts saying things like, that whatever, the one thing that they all agree on is the Cro-Magnon man came here suddenly, right? He didn't just evolve. You've got Danny Vendramini, them and us, right? So the speed of the Upper Paleolithic revolution in the Levant was also breathtaking. Anthropologists Ofer Bar Yosef and Bernard Vandermeersch. So between 40,000 and 45,000 years ago, the material culture of Western Eurasia changed more than it had in the previous million years. Okay, the efflorescence of technological and artistic creativity signifies the emergence of the first culture that observers today would recognize as human, right, marked as it were by unceasing invention and variety. During that brief period of 5,000 years or thereabouts, the stone toolkit, unchanged in its essential form for ages, suddenly began to differentiate wildly from century to century and from region to region. Okay, why that happened is still a mystery, right? Nobody knows the reason for that. This is the biggest mystery in anthropology. Likewise, Eduardo Cardona, flare star. Remember I said that Troy had managed to actually translate some of Cardona's works into human readable form. Where and how Cro-Magnons first arose remains unknown. Their appearance, however, coincided with the most bitter phase of the Ice Age. There's no doubt they were more advanced, more sophisticated than the Neanderthals with whom they shared the land, living in larger, more organized groups than had earlier humans. Cro-Magnon, and he's calling these Neanderthals earlier humans, which is wrong, right? I mean, Duarte was using the term Neanderthal.
Yeah, I don't think they were.
No, but believe me, they're not humans. Okay,
they were definitely a hominid of some kind, but not necessarily.
Believe me, we're going to get to that very shortly. Believe me, they were not humans. Okay, there's a lot of BS that floats around the world, about Neanderthals. You've got this group called 23andMe, and this, I created a separate Facebook group called Neanderthal Realities simply so that somebody on Facebook doing a search on Neanderthal could come up with something other than just total misinformation, right? You've got about 5 other groups on Facebook whose names include the word Neanderthal, and all they are is like just, fonts of disinformation. Okay, talking about Cro-Magnon people spread out until they populated most of the world's tools made of bone, stone, even wood were carved into harpoons, awls, fish hooks. Presumably able hunters, although as with the Neanderthals, they would have been foraged to gather edible plants, roots, and wild veggies. This is the key to it. He said, the only problem here is that as far as can be told, the Cro-Magnons seem to have arrived on the scene without leaving a single trace of our evolutionary ancestors. They didn't have any evolutionary ancestors. Okay, you get the idea, right?
Right, yeah.
So skip past this. I've got a picture of some of these Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon cave paintings.
Which is awesome for when they were put up there. I mean, it's just awesome work. The creativity and the ingenuity to do it is awesome.
Yeah, this is splendid artwork. I mean, you've had like major artists of the last couple of centuries who said this is good as anything.
I'm an artist. I mean, I know.
Right. This is as good as anything which has been produced in the last couple hundred years. Okay. There's also a question of artwork. Let me go over this. It says, coming from other hominids with no artistic capabilities whatsoever to the Cro-Magnon Sistine Chapel at Lascaux in southern France with no evidence to be found in the world of any kind of a run-up to that. That obviously is not compatible with the idea of humans evolving from apes or hominids, okay? What this evidence is compatible with is the idea that Cro-Magnon man, fully formed, came here from somewhere else in our own system, which is the basic thesis of cosmos in collision. Okay, that's what we've just been over.
Right.
Yeah, humans and hominid, the lack of a relation, Neanderthals, right? The idea of humans evolving from hominids is not tenable. For any hominid to have evolved into a human, here's what would have to have happened. That hominid would have to have lost his fur while ice ages were going on, lost almost all of his night vision while living in the perpetual twilight of this purple dawn age, while surrounded by predators which could see very nicely in the dark, lost almost all of his sense of smell while trying to survive as a land prey animal. It'd have had to have lost everything he needed to live, thrive, and survive, right? I mean, that's just ridiculous. One of
the biggest things is the hair to me. I mean, because we're not suited for here, and every other animal in the world is suited to the environment.
The biggest thing is the sense of smell, the lack of a sense of smell.
Well,
no land prey animal.
I hadn't ever really considered that in my thoughts, but it is intriguing, and I can understand why you say that too, because it is one of the biggest sensory inputs of an animal.
Right. The one other shot somebody could take at a hominid to human evolutionary scheme would be to claim, as Denny Vendramini does, that Cro-Magnon man arose from gracile hominids, the school Kopsa hominids, that predation by Neanderthals drove those gracile hominids into a fast process of evolution into Cro-Magnon man. Nonetheless, I know that, like, you've got this article of James Shreves from 1995, right, which says that, like, you just didn't have any of this artwork or any of these tools or anything. So here in the Levant, however, the arrival of anatomically modern humans, which he's claiming these gracile hominids were not anatomically modern humans. They might have looked a little bit more like humans, but I mean, that's, their skulls are not human skulls. Okay. And so they didn't have any of the things that we associate with Cro-Magnon man, right? It's like, You can read that. So you can't expect anybody to believe the Cro-Magnon man with his grand art and advanced tools and weapons arose in very little time from something like that, particularly when there's a vastly better explanation to be had, which is the Ganymede hypothesis, okay?
Right.
The SQ hominids are basically just other hominids. What do we know about hominids? Okay. We concern ourselves with the following group of hominids: Homo erectus, the Homo heidelbergensis, the Neanderthal, the Skulkovsa hominids, the archaic giants, right, that you were finding in burial mounds in the Americas, right, and the Sasquatch. You've got a picture here like of, what do we have here? Homo erectus, a Neanderthal, and then one of those Skulkovsa hominids, right? You can see that the Skulkovsa hominid skull looks a little bit closer to being human. It was still a hominid skull. We've still got a snout.
There's still a pronounced difference in the shape.
Yeah, it's got a snout, right? As humans don't have snouts. It's
right.
Sometimes when they do reconstructions of the Neanderthals, they have them looking down at their feet, so it doesn't look, so their faces look a little bit flatter.
Okay. Well, they're also doing that all on what we know about humans, not
right,
the structure that they actually had. I mean, we can guess at the structure, but we don't know for sure.
Yes, up until recently, they've spoken about the Neanderthal as if he was like a missing link, right? But Neanderthal DNA has turned out to be halfway between ours and that of a chimpanzee, right? Which eliminates the Neanderthal as a plausible human ancestor. And at that point, their minds got messed so badly that they started saying things which didn't make any sense at all. They say, the claim you'll read now is that modern humans and the Neanderthal are cousins, right? That we had some common ancestor 500,000 years ago. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that like too genetically remote to be ancestral to is a transitive relationship, right? In other words, if we can't be descended from the Neanderthal, then we surely can't be descended from something further back than the Neanderthal. It's like, it's like claiming that wolves are too genetically remote from foxes to be ancestral to them, and therefore foxes must be descended directly from fish, right? That's ridiculous. Okay, and as if that wasn't bad enough, the popular image of the Neanderthal, that is the image which scientists proclaim and which the media carries, have been corrupted by pseudo-religious and pseudo-ideological ideas over the past several decades, until we have a situation in which the concept which scientists and scholars had like in the late 1800s is actually better than what we have now for the most part, the exception being Danny Vendermini.
Well,
okay.
I hate to interrupt you, but I want the recording stops in 4 minutes, but we continue right up to the top of the hour, and I want to make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you. Would you tell them your websites again and how to find your book?
I want to
make sure it gets in the recording.
Yeah, www.bearfabrique.org, like a bear in the woods, B-E-A-R, and then fabrique, French spelling, like you're going to fabricate something, a word for factory. F as in Frank, F-A-B-R-I-Q-U-E, bear, bear.org. Okay, everything else is linked from that. The other website for the Ganymede hypothesis itself is called cosmosandcollision.com, right? But that's linked from Bear Fabrique. You've got a picture of Marcelin Boule's reconstruction of a Neanderthal, which is reasonably accurate here. This was one of the early reconstructions of Neanderthal. You've got the kinds of reconstructions that you see if you scroll down a little bit. The Neanderthal is generally presented as if he was just a little bit different from one of us, right? He's become a poster child for kumbaya pseudo-religion. You see the picture of the 4 Neanderthals here?
Yeah, that's why I was saying they base that on what they know about our structure and how our muscle systems work.
That's not what a Neanderthal looked like. If you scroll down,
I didn't think so myself.
If you scroll down a bit more to where it talks about Danny Vendermini's Neanderthal reconstructions, you can see what a Neanderthal actually looked like.
Right, now that I can agree with.
Okay, that's what a Neanderthal looked like. That's what a creature with DNA halfway between ours and that of a chimpanzee looks like. And see,
that's what reminds me of what they call Bigfoot today.
Yeah, only like I say, these weren't 10 feet tall. The Bigfoot would be 9 or 10 feet tall if he actually does exist. Cro-Magnon, early human needles are common, but nobody's ever found a Neanderthal needle, right?
Right.
And yeah, that's because a creature with a 6-inch long Ice Age fur coat doesn't require needles. How about that?
Maybe a razor, but
no, it doesn't. You know, he wouldn't have any use for a razor either. I think you're perfectly happy. You got
yeah. See, they developed according to their environment, which was in Northern Europe.
Right. Now, there's also a question of: are we just about out of time here, or?
Yeah, we got 2 minutes for the recording, and then 5 more minutes.
Okay. There's also a claim that humans, and this is the thing that you get with 23andMe, right? You get all these yuppies. They're sending off for DNA sample kits, and they send them back, you know, like you are 2.75% Neanderthal. Oh, gee, that's wonderful. I'm bad, right? You know. You haven't seen this?
Oh, I'm not going to give. I don't care what my DNA says.
Right. I mean, I told this one poor woman on one of those groups, like, I said, listen, it's like being the designated party pooper is a dirty job. Somebody's got to do it, right? I said, your percentage of Neanderthal ancestry is the same as mine or everybody else on the earth is exactly 0. I mean, if there are any Neanderthal genes in any modern humans, that wouldn't come from interbreeding, would come from eating Neanderthals, right? And I mean, you know, the first experience modern humans ever had with Neanderthals watching friends and family members get killed and eaten by them. So that, like, eating, you know, I mean, they exterminate.
Well, now, the Neanderthal man would have had to have been mainly a meat-eating predator anyways, because of the environment it grew up in. So it would eat any kind of meat that it killed.
Oh, yeah, they would have.
And I'm sure that would include humans.
Yeah, they would regard us as a prey animal. You know, that's, like I say, eating a Neanderthal which had been killed in a battle would be sending a message to the Neanderthals in their own language. Right? They say you are what you eat, right? I mean, that would be if there are.
Well, that's true, because we carry the DNA of animals that have been in our systems, you know.
Right. If there are any Neanderthal genes in modern humans, which is highly questionable, you could get Troy to talk to you about that. Then that's what they would come from. They wouldn't come from interbreeding with Neanderthals. You know. Well,
I tell you, we're going to have to get you back on sometime here soon and finish our talk here. So everybody, remember, this is Revolution Radio. Come check us out. All right, we got about 5 more minutes. I think the recording stopped just then.